Calling the special council meeting of February 3rd to order. Thank you. Internet won't work. That's super. We're looking for an adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Nielsen. Did the vote pop up for anybody else? Ryan? Green of envy.
Councillor Lonsdale, are you able to sign into the iCompass?
Karen, I tried it from here before and I wasn't able to.
Okay.
I think it's got something to do with my Wi-Fi.
Make sure you get your username and login password figured out. If you're able to connect your video and virtually to the meeting, you should be able to log into iCompass.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
Are you in favor of the agenda as presented?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And Councillor Billingsley as well. Councillor Elliott, are you able to? There you go. Perfect. Item 3, new and unfinished business, municipally controlled corporation and wastewater treatment plant discussion.
Good morning, Council. This meeting was called regarding the public hearing for the municipally controlled corporation. I have a short report and then would be open to any questions from Council. Administration received direction from Council to complete a Q&A document with all the questions asked prior to and at the public hearing of the MCC. An additional motion was made to correct misinformation that was discussed but not pertinent to the MCC, which will come at a later date. The report today includes 57 questions with corresponding answers that will be posted to the city's website today and will form part of the minutes of today's meeting minutes. It should be noted that there were several statements with no questions that were not addressed here. Staff reviewed the video from the meeting and the official questions submitted to ensure all questions were captured and answered. As well, questions are still being asked through the online platform and answers are being provided there. The general theme of the questions leads administration to believe that there is a lack of understanding between the project and the MCC, which has been addressed in the Q&A. Specifically, the MCC is not the foundation of the cost increases. Rather, it's the water treatment plant itself that is raising rates. The biggest concern for citizens is clearly the costs associated with the water treatment plant and what is perceived to be the city is not doing its due diligence in both technology review and lobbying other orders of government for further funding or lowering of the regulations. Administration can confirm that in fact there was a thorough review of technologies that would meet the effluent regulations placed on the city to be the most economical overall, with a major focus being on operational costs, as those are the long-term costs that most affect rates. In addition, ongoing attempts to both reduce regulations through Alberta Environment and Parks staff and government lobbying have been unsuccessful after several attempts to get ministers' attention on this and even trying to reach out to the federal government around the province. Administration ran out of time in order to meet the 2023 deadline placed by the federal government and has begun to work on the construction options. While council has the ultimate decision on this matter, there needs to be close consideration on risks associated with each option. Based on those risk assessments, it was found that to continue down the path of the P3 was the best option for our ratepayers. We realize a lot of this has to do with other orders of government placing these regulations on the city. And I mean, at this point, while we continue to lobby other orders of government, the looming deadline to meet these regulations is still there, and we have not found an avenue to stop that from happening. So we are open to questions from council at this time.
Through the chair, Sue. Sue, I sent some questions in and some of them are partially addressed here. You mentioned that the water rates are a cost of the water treatment plant. It has nothing to do with Aqua Terra or Graham. So my question still surrounds the issue of the amount of borrowing that has to be done by Graham to complete the project. And if there is less dollars required in the debenture because we find money in reserves or other locations to bring that debenture down, do we know what the implications of that would be in true dollars and cents? So for example, if we pull money out of reserves, we would be losing some revenue, interest revenue from money we had in reserves, although we continue to oftentimes deplete our reserves as we do projects. At the same time, by decreasing the debenture, there's less payment in the long term to Graham in what was called the delta factor in the report that was given to us. And I'm assuming it would have implications on the utility rates. And I know my question may not have given you sufficient time at this point to get those questions answered, but if you have answers, I'd appreciate them. And if they don't, I'd still look forward to seeing them.
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, we have not calculated those out right now. Those options are being reviewed through the finance department right now, but one of the things we're trying to get done concurrently is what is our financial position at the end of 2021. And so once we reconcile all of those accounts to committed funds versus what's left, we'll be able to do an analysis on that and get it to council.
We'd be able to do that prior to making a decision on this then?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some questions that I sent to Sue as well. So through the mayor to Sue. Sue, is there a projected cost per year for construction? Or is it just going to be all one total?
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, do you mean what effect the construction has on the rates every month?
I'm just wondering, will we be paying on a lump sum, or will we be paying 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? Like, will it be divided amongst a number of years as opposed to paying it off all at once? So if we choose the $40 million option, Do we have to pay $40 million in 2023? Or I know we're going to be making payments, but I'm trying to figure out how much it's going to cost us right off the bat. Like, is there a lump going to be taken out in 2023, kind of like a down payment?
Through the chair to Councillor
Maybe I'm
Elliott.
not clear, but
I think I understand what you're saying. So we would draw down like we would with any typical construction project. As we need the money, we would borrow it. So the P3 consortium is looking at securing the funds. And then once the funds are secured, we would draw down as we need it rather than borrowing it all at once. I would anticipate as projects go, if we have to be open by 2023, that all of the money has been borrowed by the end of 2023. And then we would start making our payments in 2024.
okay, thank you. I just have a few questions, Mr. Mayor. The projected monthly costs of water usage and wastewater for the next 5 years, is there a significant increase? We've projected what it's going to cost, correct? And is there a significant increase?
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott. So yes, the information was contained in the business plan package that was available as part of this process. And with the current city's rate structure going back to 2020, which in 2021, there was a reduction. So we've gone back to 2020 rates. We do anticipate that by 2024, we would need to go up either the 26 or 53% on those utility rates. And as previously discussed, it would be prudent to maybe look at phasing in over the next few years those increases so that it's not felt all at once.
And this is a self-sufficient fund, correct? This is not being supplemented by taxpayers' dollars.
Correct. So the utilities would pay for itself. The only other thing that's worked into utilities is a return on investment to the city, and that is reflected in the operations budget.
And you gave to us a comparison of water rates with surrounding communities and municipalities of similar size. And it appears that our water rates are certainly comparable to everybody else. Is that not correct?
That is correct, and we can put that information up on the city's website as well.
Okay, thank you. Have alternate ways of meeting the government requirements been explored, as was suggested by Glenn Rooker when he was here for the meeting?
Yes, there's been extensive review of the technology that would be required to meet both federal and provincial effluent regulations. When it was suggested that we could truck out like Edmonton, we investigated and easily found that Edmonton is trucking out solid waste, so their landfill is being moved somewhere else, but they do their own wastewater treatment. So we've looked at all of the different technologies. We've had a lot of people come in and say, well, why can't you just land spread? Because it's common to take effluent and spread it out on farmers' fields, and it helps with the soil. And while that works in a lagoon system, it's not going to be enough to get us where we need to meet the effluent requirements. And so in order to meet those really stringent requirements, we need a mechanical treatment system. And then it's just a matter of which system is going to meet the different regulations that we have. So we reviewed several different technologies. Again, all of those will be noted on the city's website as well on which ones we reviewed. And the one that we settled on was chosen primarily because of the operational costs, like I mentioned. So we would take into effect certain criteria, the cost of the upfront cost of it, the proven technology, the safety, the environmental advantages, meeting all of the requirements, and then operational cost was a huge piece of that because that is where we tend to see most of the utility rate increases once the facility is paid off. So.
When does the upgrade have to officially be completed?
So the federal government has given us a deadline of the end of 2023. And from that deadline, the provincial government adopted that. So when they renewed our permit, we get 10-year permits for wastewater. When they renewed the permit, they gave us one set of regulations up until the end of 2023, and then a different set of regulations after 2023, again, anticipating that the new wastewater treatment facility would be in place by the end of 2023.
And is there any way to get an extension?
We've already gotten an extension. Actually, they originally wanted, in our 2018 permit renewal, they wanted to give us those rates right then, which would have meant we needed to start construction immediately. And so we've actually delayed the last 5 years to do lobbying, to try and approach the government to get different regulations, to look at regionalization with surrounding communities and that sort of thing.
Okay. So it's my understanding that the federal government has regulations, and then the provincial government has even stricter regulations, but we haven't received any federal funding, even though they're the ones who have asked us to clean this up, correct?
Correct. So originally, twice we had applied for a grant through the province. The way that the relationship works with the federal and provincial governments is the federal governments give the province money or access to grant funding, and then the province is the one that manages the program for them. So we had applied through that program twice, and were denied. The focus for the Water for Life, which is the federal fund that this was coming through, is on water, not wastewater treatment. And so we were denied both times. Then when COVID hit, there was a stimulus package that was sent out by the province, and they had asked us for, our top 10 shovel-ready projects. We put this one down as one of them. So the province did end up giving us their 1/3, which is the typical funding strategy between provincial, federal, and local governments. And then we were unable to get 1/3 from the federal government because that program had closed. There was no more intake on that grant.
So we don't appear to be getting a lot of support from our member of parliament. Am I correct?
We had tried to reach out a couple of times to get to the federal counterparts to get this money and talk about the regulations. And each time we were instructed to go back to the province and deal with them. So we have not had a lot of success in trying to get federal support or even get to the table to have a discussion with them.
Just one more question. I have it in my notes that the city will lease the water from the MCC. Is that correct?
No, what's going to happen? So the city, in the proposed model, the city would be 100% shareholder of the MCC, and we would lease to them everything, all of our infrastructure, and then the MCC would then lease out to the operations through Aqua Terra to get everything maintained to meet the requirements of Alberta Environment and Parks.
But the city owns it.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Sue.
Mhm.
Thank you. Through the chair to Sue. Correct me if I'm misplaced here, but we know water rates are going up. And I'm assuming water rates are going up because of borrowing. And then water rates are going up also because of the new additional costs of operations. Is that a good starting point?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, the new facility, so when we first started looking at this back in 2018 and then 2019, we were bringing reports through to council. We had identified that this new wastewater treatment facility, just the operations of it, was going to add about $1 million to the operational impacts in that area. The operational impacts, the current operations of the entire system, plus the new facility have all been worked into those new rates. But I should note that the amount, the price that we're getting for the operations is actually within our existing budget that we have. So there are already savings found in going that route.
Okay, what I'm leading up to is a follow-up on Councillor Elliott's question about the actual rates. And my question is, how soon will our residents see rate increases? So the moment Graham borrows $30 million, there's a cost immediately in terms of starting to pay down that debenture. And then there's the additional cost somewhere after the project is completed where the cost of operations goes up. So from the moment Graham borrows the money to start the project, will our residents see water rates go up to start paying that debenture down? Or do we start seeing water rates go up when the project is completed and they combine the debenture increases and the operational increases to cause the rate increase?
Yeah, so the residents will not see the rate increase depending on what council decides each year through budget until 2024. The cost of borrowing and we're not expected to pay it down until the project is substantially complete. Substantially complete means it is in place and functioning as intended. So we don't need to start making payments on it until then. Administration will be bringing forward recommendations though through each budget process on potentially phasing this in. So they could start to see rates increase earlier depending on what council decides. But legitimately based on the borrowing, we would not need to do the increase until 2024.
Thank you. My next question, Sue, is at what point are affluent discharge readings taken? In other words, in order to meet provincial and federal requirements for discharge to meet certain chemical limits, they've got to be doing a reading at some point. Do they do a reading at the point of our discharge or at the point somewhere down the line after we have discharged into whatever means we discharge into?
We are required to do the testing, and it's once we release, and Kathy can correct me if I'm wrong, within 24 hours, we have to take a sample at the point of release. And we test that gets tested as per the guidelines to see if it meets the effluent requirements.
Now, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but if our readings are at the point of our release, how do other factors weigh into that in terms of water runoff from sources outside of our community impact those numbers?
Mm-hmm. So this has been part of the argument that I've been having with Alberta Environment Parks for 5 years now. We are what is called a point source releaser. And in the Battle River watershed that we are a part of, there are 3 of us. There's Camrose, Wetaskiwin, and Panoka that are point source releasers. And I have been arguing with AEP for years that we are actually a fraction of the contamination in the environment, and that the bigger contamination is the agricultural grounds and within our basin. And I've argued several times that, you know, if everyone was responsible to clean up their portion, maybe the city would only have to spend $5 or $10 million to get to that quality. That's not the way the regulations are written in Alberta Environment and Parks. They do not hold anybody else responsible except for us 3 in this entire watershed, which goes right from Pigeon Lake to
Right,
Camrose.
but we're not processing any other wastewater but our own.
Correct.
And so if we're being asked to meet discharge limits at our point of release, then how do other contributors to that watershed fit into this? Because I was I guess I was falsely understanding that part of the data that was collected for Environment Alberta regulators, whatever, was that we were trying to fix a problem beyond our own. But I don't understand how we'd be trying to fix a problem beyond our own if our data is collected only at our point of release.
The other people outside of the 3 municipalities are not being held responsible.
But Sue, that doesn't change our numbers.
Well, I know, but what it does is it means they're allowed to pollute and we have to clean it up. So where it hits, you know, I've had this discussion with AEP where I said, okay, I have testing numbers up to where we release. I'll meet that and not make it better. And they said, not good enough. You have to make it better, which means we are cleaning up everyone upstream of us.
Okay, so. So are we being held? Are we being held to a higher standard at our point of release in order to compensate for upstream non-treated water sources?
All point source releasers are being held to that higher standard to compensate for people that are not being forced to meet the standards. Yes. Not just us, other municipalities as well, but yes, we are all being held to a higher standard.
A higher standard than what? Higher than what?
So there are standards to protect the environment. And if the other people that are contaminating the environment upstream of us are not, they have no standards to meet, it's hard to not get technical on this so that you're going to understand. So what happens is when we take that water, that wastewater, we put it in a container, they put it in a container and they put trout in there. And then they start to see if the trout are stressed out or if the trout die. If so many are stressed out, that's fine in so many hours. But when they start dying, that's the indication that it's not good enough. And so all the chemicals or nutrients that are in the wastewater have to come out so that the trout can live. And in order to make that happen, we have to literally strip everything out of it to the point where everything from our release, they assume it just gets better the further down it goes. But at that point, the trout can live. I don't know if I probably haven't answered your question.
Well,
Right?
I guess, and again, I understand that upstream folks are not held to the same standard as we are as we release into the watershed. And the fact that they don't is not fair. But as a separate issue, our water treatment plant will meet provincial guidelines for chemical abatement in the wastewater at the point of release. Wow, where do I want to go with this? Maybe nowhere. I'm going to sit on that and I'm going to wrestle with how I can phrase it differently, I think, and capture my thoughts without wasting your time. You talked about us being shareholders in the corporation. Are we a 50-50 shareholder in the corporation? Or are we a 51-49% shareholder? Like, do we as the owner of the facility, do we have controlling interest in that corporation, or are we an equal partner? And I'll leave it there.
So the city is 100% shareholder of the MCC. The MCC then has different partners internally. So we have an agreement with Aqua Terra for operations. And then we would have an agreement with Graham Construction for the construction. And we would have an agreement with Graham Capital, who is getting the funding. Now, the Graham Capital was what they called the PICO. And the city, that's the one where we're equal shareholders in that, because that's linked to the debt. So it is another agreement under the umbrella that the city is 100% shareholder of.
But when the time comes for the MCC to say, let's raise the water rates by 72.5%. Do we have a 50-50 voice in that conversation, or do we have less than that, more than that?
So the proposed rate or board of director structure is that council will have the majority. So we have to have an odd number. We are proposing 3 council members, 2 administrative staff, and 1 from Graham and 1 from Aqua Terra. So we were proposing 7, where council has 3 votes. And you would assume the 2 from administration. So there's 5 votes from an owner's perspective and 2 from the contracted party's perspective.
Okay, thank.
And that can be made up however council wants. We just need to make sure there's an odd number.
Okay, and I want to go back to my other line of questioning. So the other upstream contributors to the water basin, watershed have no impact on our costs related to this project and the water rates to our citizens.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Sue, it's my understanding that the project is going to be around $51 million if that's the direction we go. We received 12.9 million from the province. And I guess my question would be to do with the agreement with Graham Capital. Is there, in the agreement with them, with the city, is there a guaranteed amount? I mean, they're going to make money on borrowing the money. So is there an amount that has been agreed upon? So in other words, if we decide to take money out of reserves or pull some money out of our own debt to put towards that, are they comfortable with only going to market with $15 million as opposed to $30 million? Is that anywhere in the agreement as the amount that they can borrow or that they want to borrow?
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, currently we've been going under the impression that they would borrow everything except for the 12.9 million that we got from the province. They are obviously closely monitoring what's the discussions are happening here because we've been trying to, in the background, get everything set up and ready. If council decides to make a different decision, then the borrowing would be based on what we cannot raise. It might change some of the conditions a little bit, but those terms and conditions have not been obviously solidified. So they're open and we can still make changes to those.
And to follow up with that, is there anything in the agreement if they go with the full amount and the federal government comes to the table with $13 million 6 months from now. Is there something in the agreement that we have the ability with, and do we know what the penalty would be for that? Because obviously, when it's basically a mortgage, when they borrow the money, the people that they're borrowing the money from are wanting a guaranteed amount of rate of return, right? So is that in the agreement as well? Has that been negotiated yet?
Yeah, so there will be a term in all of the agreements we have for exit clauses. And there will be an ability to say, we need to pay this down earlier. We want out of this whole thing. What that looks like right now, we don't know exactly because we haven't nailed down a lender. So if it is the direction of council that we continue with this, we will start to work out and flesh out more of those details. We were looking at set terms for the agreements, and then possible extensions, and then on top of that, having the ability to either pay down or get out at other times with notice. Obviously, you pay a premium to get out of something early, but all of that stuff will be worked into the agreements.
Thank you. My next question will have to do with the debt limit. Because of the utilities will be moved into the MCC. Our debt limit then will be decreased because of the assets being moved to the MCC. Does administration have any concerns about the reduction of the amount of debt limit ceiling that we have available to us?
No, we do have, we're developing out our asset management plan, and we do have a long-term idea of the amount of infrastructure that needs to be repaired. We do believe that given proper planning and phasing in of the most important projects, that the debt limit that we have is sustainable in helping with all of that. Now, as grants change, we would need to go in and re-examine some of that.
Thank you. Just one last thing to follow up on Councillor Nielsen's. You kind of sparked some questions in my mind as far as the testing and where it's done, and the upstream contributors to the environment. And so my understanding is that from what you said, that we test right at our source. And I'm going to make up a number and say that that's 10. But when it goes downstream, it may go to 11, 12, 13, whatever those numbers are. But how does that affect us? That when it leaves, once we've done our testing, how does that concern us that by the time it gets to 5 miles out of town, and now it's at a higher number, whatever that number may be, how does that concern us?
So that concerns us because environment is looking at those numbers. And let's say downstream at the Battle River, the number is 50. And they need to get, they say a safe limit is 30 so that all the fish and the habitat can survive. So then they say, okay, we're at 50. We need to get down 20 points. We have 1 point source releaser. It's on them. So if it's coming in and passing our community at 50, then they say, okay, Wetaskiwin, you can't contribute 50 because we need you down at 30. So we actually need you at 10 so you can clean up the other contaminants in the area. So our effluent release rates are much more stringent to try and clean up the rest of it.
That makes sense. Thank you. Not fair, but makes sense.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Aberley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Through the chair, to Sue. I have a question more, I think it's more about the lease with Aquaterra. And I think that we've gone through this a little bit as we were discussing, but I just want to sort of re-explain to me is if Aquaterra is the operator, do we have a proposed term limit on that, or a way that if I don't want to foresee problems, but if there's problems, how tied are we to this lease once everything's done and completed? Should we move forward?
Through the chair to Councillor Eberly, all of the agreements are going to have exit clauses, and the terms of the agreement with Aquaterra will match the terms of the agreement with Graham Capital and the funding sources. So the theory is if we're getting out of everything at once, potentially, but we do have the opportunity to separate them out too. Let's say we like the service we're getting from Aquaterra, but we've hit the jackpot and got a bunch of money. We can get out of one side without getting out of the other, or we can get out of both at the same time. So they will both have exit clauses built in and terms built in to each.
Okay. And so and I think maybe, Sue, I'm thinking more into the future once let's say once the project's done, and maybe you don't have that answer right now. And I understand that there's still negotiations that would have to be done. But I mean, are we looking at Aquaterra forever? Are we looking at Aquaterra for 10 years? Like, what's that initial sort of idea for them to be the operators of the MCC should it go forward?
So my gut is telling me that if this works out, this is something we should consider for, permanently. Their water and wastewater operators are very hard to come by in this province. And the more stringent or higher, like the stringent requirements that we have mean we need this mechanical treatment facility. That mechanical treatment facility requires somebody with a level 3 and or potentially a level 4 water certification. And there are a handful of them in the province. So we, right now with our current lagoons, we only need a level 1 wastewater treatment certified operator. Those are easy. All of our staff have that. The level 3 or the level 4, those are very hard to get in the province, and they go to typically the bigger urban centers that pay more, have more room for advancement, that sort of thing. So using a company like Aquaterra gives us access to their level 3s and level 4s without having to try to be that competitive in a small community.
Right. No, I understand that. Thank you. If I may just follow up with a question, but I think I know the answer. Not know the answer, but I've been asked several times about the environmental levy, and I think that this is just through to probably council. So I understand that the environmental levy that is currently on our utility bills, and I understand that it was transferred, for the landfill, and that it was moved in to try to help for this. And I'm having questions about whether that's going to be removed if we were to go forward with this. And it's my understanding, but I just wanted to sort of clarify that in this public council meeting, that is as we would move forward as council to make those decisions. Am I correct in that?
You are correct. Council makes the decisions on the rates, but it is administration's recommendation that as long as there is capital work, we have a capital fee.
Okay.
A few years ago, I had presented to council a different rate structure where right now our water rates cover storm work because we do not have a storm charge, but there's storm stuff that has to happen. So it's currently coming out of the water rates. If we were to create capital dollars in each water, wastewater, and storm that could be used for capital work only, it actually reduces the consumption variable of the bill. And as capital gets done, we can then reduce those capital fees. So many other communities have gone through and put these in 10, 15, 20 years ago. And a lot of them are seeing those rates, either the reserves have built up so much that they're able to drop the rate off, or they're literally 50 cents for a storm, capital fee, and it keeps the reserves at a point that it's sustainable. So sustainable rate, predictable rates, those sorts of things are going to be big reports that are going to start coming to council once we get Aqua Terra in place, if
Okay.
that is the decision.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one last thing from me through to Sue. Sue, we're talking 40 or 53 million dollars using approximate numbers. The 40 million we have to do, the extra 13 is something that we're going to have to do down the road. So if we do it all at the same time, we get a much better bang for our buck rather than doing the first project and then some years down the road doing the second project, which will probably cost significantly more. Correct?
That's correct. And a part of the increased costs are operational. So if we don't do these other pieces that need to be done in the next 3 to 5 years, it takes a lot more staff time. So when Aquaterra was looking at pricing it, they said, if this work isn't done, we have to spend X percentage more time taking care of those pieces because they're at the end of life. And so if we were able to do them together, not only do we capitalize on the construction savings because we're here and we're doing it, but we also capitalize on lower operational fees moving forward because they don't have to spend as much time on those facilities. Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, it's a complicated question. There is no standard. And it typically what happens is when a municipality has to upgrade or renew their permit, the province will ask us to do a water quality based effluent study. And that study looks at your particular environment. It looks at what we call, it's a 10-to-1 mixing zone. So whatever you're releasing into, we had a resident recently reach out about Montreal and the spill that they've had and how can they do that, but we can't. Well, they released into a massive body of water. So the dilution is more than 10-to-1. So they're not killing fish. We release into a dry creek. There is no water. There is no mixing zone. So besides the fact that I personally think the report is a waste of time because we didn't have a mixing zone, it automatically put us at a default and to look at higher and more stringent rates. Every community or point source releaser has a different situation. So some of them might go into the Red Deer River or the North Saskatchewan River where there's a massive 10-to-1 mixing zone. They'll have different regulations. So it is based on your current environment around you plus the contaminants coming in. Correct. I'm going to go out on a limb and say AEP would say no to that for a couple of reasons. They control the water source and the permit that we have. The permit we have to pull the water is for our drinking water only. And it's going to create other unintended consequences. So besides the cost of piping all that water here, it would create, we would have to put enough water in there that it would create erosion issues around the creek. And as a professional engineer, if I were in that person's position, I would not approve something like that either, based on the regulations and all of the other things that could happen. So every time we look at a different solution, we have to take into account these other pieces, and erosion of the environment out there is a real, and yeah, it's absolutely.
Hello,
Your mic on?
hello.
Hello?
I can't hear Mr. Nielsen on his last two comments. I can only hear Karen's answers.
Okay, we're just getting his mic on.
My apologies. So you've indicated that we've not got a lot of traction with other orders of government. So you've indicated also that we will continue to do so. So how do we get people's attention? Like what is your strategy for reaching out and trying to find other sources, as Councillor Billingsley was talking about, so we can mitigate the borrowing capacity that we have to get to?
So we work with a government relations group, and they've been helping us try to connect with the different orders of government. I've reached out to Mike Lake's office. We have tried several times to reach through to Minister Nixon, et cetera. And so I think at this point, we're just going to sit down with administration and our government relations group and develop out a bit of a strategy on how we can get the attention of the government to say, you know, we need help here, and not put ourselves in a position where we're going to get fined by slowing up the process. Now, what that looks like, I think we're going to develop it out over the next couple of days, and we hope that we could have some answers for council prior to the February 14th meeting. The biggest risk or concern that I have is that we're only delaying the inevitable, because even if we were to get, like, we've asked Minister Nixon specific things, we need more money, we need relaxed regulations. At some point, the entire province is going to be to that standard, and then they're going to turn to us and say, it's your turn now. So we would be delaying the inevitable. We had asked for phasing previously, and the limits that they gave us that we could phase in was only going to save us $5 million, that in another 8 years, we were going to have to spend likely more than that. So we're really trying to look at the cost benefit analysis and see what is the best approach, and what's the success rate? What is the ask of the other orders of government, and how is that going to help us right now? We've also had several local businesses and influential families reach out and say, what can we help you approach the government? So we're looking at all the options right now.
Thank you.
Probably more tongue in cheek than anything, but if we're releasing into a dry bed, what is the relevance of a stress test on fish for effluent readings?
I ask myself that same question. I at one point I had said to the government, you shouldn't even be testing on trout because we have jackfish and those things can live through anything. To which they said, yeah, you're not gonna change our minds on this. So there are federal regulations, there are tests that are standardized across the country. And as much as I tried we are not going to change that,
Just in case trout start migrating into our watershed. I understand.
exactly. It's bizarre.
Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Sue, could you let the public know, in case anybody here, it doesn't fully understand, there's going to be, or looks, we're going to look at possibly two projects. One is the $40 million and then the other one is the 11. Can you explain the differences and of the two projects and what it entails of the 40 million and or the 11 or thereabouts?
Sure, through the chair to Councillor Billingsley. The 40 million consists of the new wastewater treatment plant. So all of the work that has to go into place to make sure that we can meet those, the regulations on our permit. And the other 11 million is, there are things like headwork upgrades. So right now we have a screened facility that is supposed to pull out all this, the big pieces. You would be shocked at what people flush down the toilet. And so we are daily going in to clean out these screens, and they're pulling out buckets and garbage cans full of stuff daily. I won't get into the details of what's in there. So the new headworks is going to eliminate the need for that screen facility, which if we had to replace it right now would probably cost us $1.5 million. It's not functioning properly. And it's going to look at upgrading pumps so that they can work more effectively. A lot of the pumps that we have are undersized for, they're perfect for a lagoon, but they would be not efficient in a wastewater treatment facility. There's upgrades at both Southeast and Northeast lift station, I believe Moseson as well, that need to be upgraded to kind of make the entire system more efficient. And it's work that has to be done in the next 3 to 5 years anyways. So not only is it, we have to do it anyways, but by doing it now, it's going to help. It will help eliminate the future need for unnecessary capital work like the screening building.
Thank you.
Anything further? Councillor Nielsen.
So the current capacity of our wastewater treatment plant impacted potential investment in our community? In other words, a slaughterhouse. We can't process their bio waste or whatever. So is our current state of our water treatment plant impacting our ability to attract some investment?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, it is. We recently, in the last couple of years, had a craft brewery that was looking to move and set up here, and we cannot handle that effluent in a lagoon system.
And could we have, if we had this kind of treatment plant currently?
Yes. Yeah, we could.
Thank you.
Sure.
Through this agreement, at some point, the MCC, does it come back into the city's assessment? Like at some point, do we get the whole project back? And then does it change the very thing that Councillor Billingsley was talking about, which is our boring capability because the assessment value increases on the city side?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, the MCC will be in existence as long as council wants it to. I think there are benefits to having a separate company that can do things that a municipality can't. There are also drawbacks. Grants can be applied for through a municipality that the MCC can't get. So there are pros and cons to each side, and that's sort of discussion will happen with the board of directors each year and then reporting back to council, but at any time, the city could pull it back if they wanted to. And the decreased debt capacity that we have because of it, I would argue we don't necessarily need that if we don't have those utilities. So part of what the debt capacity could be is to cover the replacement of those pieces. Again, in a perfect world, we keep utilities separate from the tax base. Utilities pays for utilities, and we shouldn't miss that. I mean, there's other factors that come into our ability to borrow as well. So as our tax base grows, our debt capacity grows. It's not just related to our assets.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Entertain a motion to accept this information. Moved by Counselor Nielsen. You mind just clicking that on your monitor, please? You want to just move that on your monitor? Thank you. Perfect. And move it as well. Any further discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor?
I am in favor, sir. I'm sorry. I was going to try iCompass and I just didn't want to risk losing the meeting.
Counselor Lonsdale, Counselor Nielsen, Counselor Elliott, and Counselor Billingsley are all in favor. Perfect. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Anything further from administration? Counselor Blatz.
I move to adjourn.
Moved by Counselor Blatz. Ready for the question? Those in favor?
I'm in favor.
Carried unanimously. Oh, just about. Counselor Aberley wasn't sure.
Oh.
Thanks, everyone.